I woke up with a wet, viscous string of saliva trailing from my lip and across my cheek, and as I blinked my eyes into focus, I realized the moisture wasn't mine. It sounds like one of those urban legends you hear on late-night radio shows or clickbait websites. But I am sitting in this chair right now, looking at the scars on my neck, and I can still taste the metallic tang of that fluid in the back of my throat. This isn't a campfire story. It is what happened to me during my sophomore year of college when I moved to Batangas for a specialized nursing program. I needed a place to stay that was affordable but close to the campus. The boarding house was an old, sprawling structure made of wood and concrete, tucked away in a rural pocket of Batangas where the trees grew so thick they seemed to swallow the sunlight by 4 in the afternoon. It was beautiful in a heavy, suffocating way. The landlady was a woman named Ailing Marta. She was ancient, with skin like crumpled parchment and eyes that stayed fixed on your face for just a second too long before darting away. She didn't look at my luggage or my clothes. She looked at my mouth. Every time I spoke to her during the tour of the building, she would pause, watching my lips move. When we reached my room, a small space with a high ceiling and a single bed with a heavy mosquito net draped over it, she handed me a brass key. Her hand was dry and bony. She didn't offer a welcome speech. Instead, she leaned in close enough that I could smell the stale cloves and old rice on her breath. "Don't sleep with your mouth open," she whispered. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an instruction. I laughed it off at the time. I figured it was some local superstition or perhaps just a quirk of her personality. Maybe she thought I looked with a heavy sleeper who drooled on the pillows. I told her I'd be careful, and she just nodded once, her face becoming a mask of indifference. The first night was quiet. The house groaned under the weight of its own age, the wood expanding and contracting with the humidity of the coastal province. I fell asleep to the sound of cicadas screaming in the trees outside. When I woke up the next morning, my jaw felt tight, as if I had been clenching it all night. There was no wetness on my face, no hair across my lips. I just figured I'd slept deeply. On the second night, the atmosphere shifted. The air inside the room felt thick, like it had been sitting in a jar for months. Every time I turned over in bed, the floorboards outside my door gave a rhythmic creak. It wasn't random. It sounded like footsteps, slow, deliberate, and heavy. Thump, pause, thump. I stayed awake for a long time, listening. I didn't want to move. I felt as though someone was standing just outside the door, waiting for me to acknowledge them. I eventually drifted off, my mind exhausted from trying to stay alert. The third night was when the reality of the house began to press in on me. I could smell something before I even looked up. It wasn't a bad smell exactly. It was organic, like damp earth mixed with the sweet, cloying scent of rotting fruit. It hung in the air under the mosquito net, making it hard to breathe deeply. My throat felt itchy. I tried to keep my mouth shut, focusing on my breathing through my nose, but the heat of the room made it difficult. I drifted into a fitful sleep where I dreamed of a huge, cavernous mouth filled with yellowed teeth opening just inches from my face. I woke up in the middle of the night. The only light came from a sliver of moonlight cutting through the gap in the curtains. My head felt heavy. My jaw felt completely relaxed, completely open. I didn't remember opening it, but as I blinked, something hit me. A drop of liquid landed on my cheek. It was thick and lukewarm. It didn't feel like water. It had a slight viscosity to it, like mucus mixed with saliva. Then I felt the texture. A single long strand of hair, black, coarse, and unnaturally long, lay across my upper lip. It wasn't one of mine. My hair was short, cut in a bob that barely reached my chin. This hair was long enough to wrap around my mouth twice. I froze. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't even breathe. In the silence of the room, I heard a soft, wet sound. It was the sound of something licking their lips. Slurp. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The sound came from right beside my head. I slowly turned my head toward the side of the bed. There was no one there in the immediate space, but I could feel a presence. It felt like a weight on the air. And then I saw her. Ailing Marta was crouching next to my bed. She wasn't standing. She was low to the ground, her body hunched over me like a predatory insect. Her face was inches from mine. The moonlight caught the moisture on her lips, a glistening smear of saliva that trailed down her chin. She wasn't looking at me with anger. She was smiling. It was a wide, terrifying grin that stretched her skin so thin it looked like it might tear. Then she reached out. Her hand was gray and wrinkled, the nails cracked and stained. She took a small white handkerchief from her pocket. It looked filthy, stained with old spots of yellow. With agonizing slowness, she pressed the cloth against my cheek, dabbing at the wet spot as if she were cleaning a mess. She didn't speak immediately. She just stayed there, her face hovering inches from mine, the smell of rot and cloves filling my nose. Her eyes weren't focusing on me. They seemed to be looking through me into the space behind my eyes. Then she spoke. The voice didn't come from her throat. It sounded like it was vibrating out of the air itself. It was deep, hollow, and distorted, as if several voices were trying to speak through one set of vocal cords at once. "You left it open again," she said. The words were just a sentence. They were a vibration that I felt in my teeth. The voice had no gender, no age. It was simply a sound of profound, ancient annoyance. I couldn't scream. My throat felt paralyzed. I could only watch as she continued to dab at my face with the cloth. She did it 3 times, dab, dab, dab. Each time she did, the room seemed to get colder, the air becoming more stagnant. After the 3rd dab, she leaned in even closer. Her nose almost touched mine. "I have to keep you clean," she whispered. "If they get in, they won't leave you alone." Then she stood up. She didn't move like a person. She moved with a strange, jerky fluidity, as if her joints were being pulled by invisible strings. She retreated into the shadows of the room, and I heard the floorboards groan under her weight until she reached the door. I stayed still for an hour. My heart wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that wide, terrifying grin. I felt the wetness on my cheek drying into a crusty film. The next morning, I didn't wait for breakfast. I packed my bags in a state of shaking hysteria. When I walked down to the common area to get my keys, ailing Martyr was sitting at a small wooden table, sipping tea from a chipped porcelain cup. She looked normal. She looked like an old woman who had just finished her morning routine. Her eyes were clear, and her face was calm. "I'll be leaving today," I managed to say. My voice was raspy. She looked up at me. She didn't mention the night before. She didn't mention the mouth or the girl's warning. She just looked at my face with a strange, clinical intensity. "Yes, dear," she said. "You've stayed long enough to learn the rules. I left that day and never went back. I moved into a dorm in the city where there were dozens of students and no old houses, but I stopped sleeping well for months. Every time I lay my head on a pillow, I would find myself checking my cheek. I would check my mouth. I would wait for the sound of the floorboards. I started to notice things about my own body that I hadn't noticed before. My jaw sometimes felt heavy during the day. Sometimes, when I was very tired and drifted off on a bus or in a classroom, I would wake up with a faint, tingly sensation around my lips, as if something had been hovering there while I slept. I started to wonder what she meant by them. What were they getting into? And why did she have to keep me clean? The thought haunted me for years. It wasn't just the fear of a ghost. It was the realization that I hadn't been alone in that room. The landlady hadn't been protecting me from something outside the house. She had been trying to manage what lived inside the house, or perhaps what she believed lived inside of all of us. Sometimes, when the wind is high or the room is too quiet, I still feel it. A slight pressure on my lower lip, a sensation of a phantom breath against my skin. I started to wonder if she was actually trying to keep something out, or if she was merely making sure that whatever lived in the spaces between our thoughts stayed where it belonged. The most unsettling part isn't the memory of her face or the sound of her voice. It's the fact that sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the mirror and I'm feeling particularly exhausted, I see a faint, wet streak on my cheek. And for a split second, I can't remember if I slept with my mouth open tonight. I still find myself checking my face every morning before I get out of bed. I check to see if there is any lingering moisture, any stray hair, or any sign that the cleaning was necessary. I wonder if she's still there in that house in Batangas, sitting at her table with her tea, waiting for the next girl to move into the room. I wonder if she's still watching the doors, listening for the sound of a mouth opening, and wondering if the things are getting hungry again. But mostly, I find myself lying awake in my own bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember exactly what it was that she was trying to keep out. If she was keeping something out, why did her voice sound so much with the thing itself? And if she succeeded in keeping those things away from me for those 3 nights, are they still lingering in the shadows of my own mind, just waiting for me to get tired enough to let them in? I think about that room and its heavy curtains. I think about the way the air felt thick and how the floorboards groaned under a weight that wasn't just human. Every time I feel that slight, itchy sensation on my lip now, I find myself closing my eyes and making a silent vow. I won't open it. I won't let them in. But as I sit here today, recording this for you, I have to ask myself, how long can a person keep their mouth shut? How many nights can someone hold their breath before the pressure from the outside becomes too much to bear? And if that woman was right, and there are things out there just waiting for an opening, what happens when the girl finally gets tired of being careful? I still have the scar on my neck, a faint white line where I gripped my own jaw so hard during those first few nights that I bruised the skin. It's a permanent reminder of the boundary between me and whatever else was lurking in that house. When I think about her voice, that multi-layered, distorted sound, I realize it wasn't just one woman speaking. It sounded like a chorus of things trying to inhabit a single throat. And when she told me they wouldn't leave me alone if they got in, I realized that them didn't refer to monsters under the bed. They were the things that live in the silence. They are the entities that feed on the moments of vulnerability, the seconds where our defenses drop and we let our guards down. They are the things that wait for a gap in the armor, a crack in the wall, a breath taken too deeply. I still haven't been able to sleep fully since I left Batangas. I sleep with my mouth tightly shut until my jaw aches and my face muscles cramp. I use heavy blankets, even in the summer heat. I keep the lights on just enough so that I can see the corners of the room. Sometimes I think about calling her. I want to ask her if she's still there. I want to know if she ever succeeded in keeping them out for everyone else, or if she was eventually overwhelmed by the very things she was trying to contain. But again, I remember the way her face looked, the way it didn't look like a human face when she spoke. I realize that some doors are better left shut. Some warnings are meant to be followed, not questioned. I still hear it sometimes in the middle of the night when the house is very quiet. Not her voice this time, but the sound of something wet and heavy moving across a surface. A slow, sliding sound, like a tongue tracing a path over skin. It's the sound of someone or something checking to see if I've stayed disciplined. I look at the camera now and I think about you listening to this. You're in your own room. It's late. The air is still. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a small, nagging thought about the way you breathe when you fall asleep. Are you sure your mouth stays closed? Are you sure that nothing is watching from the corner of the ceiling, waiting for that one moment of exhaustion when you let go? Or are you just hoping that, like I was, you're lucky enough to have someone who notices the mess they leave behind? I still see her sometimes in my dreams. She doesn't speak in those dreams. She just stands at the foot of my bed, holding a stained white cloth, waiting for me to fail. And every morning I wake up and check my face. I look for the dampness. I look for the hair. I find nothing but the dry skin of my own face and the lingering fear of what might be lurking in the gap between my breaths. I just hope that today I can sleep without thinking about her at all. I hope that tonight, when I close my eyes, the only thing I hear is the wind and not the sound of something wet, slowly moving toward me in the dark. I wonder if you have a fear like mine. Do you ever feel like your own body isn't entirely your own? Do you ever feel like there's a barrier, a thin, fragile veil between your consciousness and something that wants to slip through? The truth is, I don't know if they are still out there in Batangas. I don't know if she is still there, guarding the empty room with her tattered cloth and her distorted voice. What I do know is that every time I feel a slight sting on my lip or hear a floorboard groan in the house where I live now, I realize that some things don't stay behind just because you move away. Some things follow the scent of an open door. They wait for the moment of weakness. They are patient, and they have all the time in the world to wait for you to get tired. I still think about her final words. They won't leave you alone. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a statement of fact. If they get in, they become part of you. They inhabit your thoughts, they ride on your nerves, and they wait for the next time you are vulnerable enough to let them take hold. I live in a city now, with locks on my doors and lights in the hallway, but I still don't sleep well. Every night, I tell myself that I am safe. I tell myself that the girl in Batangas is far away. I try to convince myself that the they she spoke of are trapped behind those old wood walls. But then, sometimes when I'm drifting off and my muscles begin to relax, I feel a sudden, sharp prickle at the corner of my mouth. It feels like a hair-long, coarse, and unfamiliar has just brushed against my skin. And in that moment, I don't see the room around me. I see her face, stretched thin and wide, and I hear that hollow, vibrating voice echoing in the back of my skull. You left it open again. I find myself waking up with a start, gasping for air, my jaw clenched so tight it aches. My heart hammers against my ribs, and I sit up in the dark, waiting for the fear to subside. I reach up and touch my cheek. It's dry. There is no hair. But as I sit there, listening to the silence of the city night, I can't help but wonder if she was right and they were waiting. How many of them are already inside? And how much longer can I keep my mouth shut before they decide it's time to come out?